The Blast from Our Past Network.
Hey everyone, co-host Corey here. I just wanted to take a quick second and say thank you to all of our Patreon supporters. Without you, Podcasting After Dark would not be possible. If you would like to help the show grow, please consider signing up at patreon.com/podcastingafterdark. You can also support the show by purchasing one of our awesome t-shirt designs on our merch store at podcastingafterdark.com. or by picking up a copy of 7 Winters Alone by David Irons on paperback, hardback, or Kindle. Just search for 7 Winters Alone on Amazon or click on the link in the show notes. A free way to help out is to leave us a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. Those reviews are huge for us and really helps get the show in front of new listeners. Again, thank you all so much for the love and support you've given us over these past few years. It really means the world to us.
Podcasting After Dark presents TV Obscura, a deep dive into underrated and unknown television shows from our youth. Cartoons, sitcoms, cop shows, and much more. Sit back and enjoy some nostalgic fun with TV Obscura.
He'll fight for freedom wherever there's trouble. G.I. Joe is there. G.I. Joe, real American hero. G.I. Joe is there.
Cobra!
Cobra!
G.I. Joe is the code name for America's daring, highly trained Special Missions Force. Its purpose: to defend human freedom against Cobra, a ruthless terrorist organization determined to rule the world.
I just want to point out that, once again, shipwreck rules.
That's right.
Overrated.
Guys and gals, if it's not apparent right now, we are talking about G.I. Joe this week. And yes, G.I. Joe's not obscure. Yes, we have covered G.I. Joe before with G.I. Joe the movie, but listen back to that, you'll know that all three of us were huge fans of this cartoon growing up. I don't know if you could survive the 80s without being inundated with G.I. Joe and Transformers, but we're all fans of G.I. Joe here. And when they announced this comic book, this Saturday morning cartoons, I guess it's like an imprint of IDW. They are going to be doing 5 issues for each like series. So now that G.I. Joe is done, they're doing a Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle one. But when they announced that they were doing this and they were going to put it out in trade form, and this comic book is a continuation of the Saturday morning cartoons that we loved as kids, we knew that we were going to review this as a proper episode on the show. But if you're just, jumping in now, let's give a little bit of backstory with our love for G.I. Joe. I'll just go real quick. I was born in 1978. I grew up with G.I. Joe, Transformers, He-Man, Star Wars. I love it all. And yes, of course, I love Spiral Zone and Centurions and Visionaries, but I also freaking love G.I. Joe. So I come at this comic book with nothing but love for the franchise. Diallo, what is your quick backstory on G.I. Joe, your history with the franchise?
I was born in the early 70s, so I was around 10, 11, 12 when they first kind of hit. And it was instant love. I remember the very first commercials for the comic book, and then for the toys after. I remember watching the Mass Device miniseries and how that expanded as a TV show, and watched it all the way through high school. And it was like probably my number one. Star Wars and G.I. Joe are my number ones and number twos, like when I was a kid. So it's everything. It was everything.
Yo, Joe, baby. What, Zach, what about you, my man?
Well, you guys know I love all things cartoons from the 80s as well, being a child of the 80s. And, as much as I love Masters of the Universe, there's only one cartoon that I have seen every single variation of and watched them repeatedly, and that's G.I. Joe. I watched the original Sunbow series. I can't tell you how many times I watched it over and over and over again, and I've watched all the incarnations since then. And you guys know I cosplayed a couple of years ago as the G.I. Joe members of G.I. Joe, and it was probably one of my favorite Halloweens of all the times. It's G.I. Joe's in my blood. I consider it to be the greatest 80s cartoon of all time.
I think a lot of people are on the same page as you with that one. I want to go through really quick just the creative team here and a little bit of a backstory on the comic, and then we are just going to go into full-on, free-form discussions, spoiler discussions, and everything. Before we jump into that, I just got to say I recommend this comic book. I think it's awesome, and if you have any interest of reading it and not being spoiled, I suggest just pausing this now and actually going and picking it up. It's like $15 or something on Amazon. It's no big deal. Guys, both of you all recommend this comic book. Just a yes or a no real quick. Diallo?
2 snake thumbs up.
That's right. Zach?
Wholeheartedly yes, yes, and yes.
Perfect. All right. So this comic book was put out. It was 5 issues. It's called Saturday Morning Adventures: G.I. Joe, A Real American Hero. So the next one is going to be called, I think, Saturday Morning Adventures: Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, and then I think they're going to keep moving forward with whatever sort of licenses they probably already own. The creative team, written by Erik Burnham, art by Dan Schoening, colors by Luis Antonio Delgado, letters by Neil Uitake. So I just want to really quick say that where I know Erik Burnham, Dan Schoening, and Luis Antonio Delgado from, they are the creative team behind IDW's ongoing Ghostbusters cartoon. Comic book. I've been reading it for years. I have multiple of the omnibuses, but the great thing about it is that it picked up after the video game. So it actually considered the video game that came out about 10 years ago to be canonically Ghostbusters 3, and then the comic book went past that. The artist, Dapper Dan Schoening, he is known for cramming so much reference material into each individual frame of the comic and everything. There was so much in the Ghostbusters comic book, and I noticed a lot of stuff in this as well, like in the background and things like that. Now, one thing that was really impressive to me, the latter end of the Ghostbusters run, they had a crossover event called Ghostbusters Get Real, where the comic book versions of the characters met up with the real Ghostbusters. And that was, I don't know if that was Dan Schoening flexing his muscles or whatnot, but he superbly accurately rendered the real Ghostbusters to look exactly like the cell-shaded animation and everything. And you can see that here in his quality. The comic book, the art looks like the cartoon on paper. Like we all 3 of us grew up reading G.I. Joe comic books as kids, and they never looked exactly like the cartoon did, Diallo, how rare is this to see something like this in the comic book world?
It's like 100% rare. Like, yeah, growing up, I would always avoid licensed books because they just never really looked good, or they didn't look like the original property, whether it was live action or from cartoon. And so the fact that this looked exactly, I mean, I actually was like, were these cells that they used from, like, I wasn't really, like, I wasn't quite paying attention to, like, the creative team. I just kind of started reading. And it was like, wow, this is literally like the cartoon.
I'm sure that you thinking it might be cells would be a massive compliment to Dan Schoening. Yeah. So I just want to give a little quick synopsis on this and give just the story. It's not overly complicated, and then we can jump right in. I'm just going to read from the back of the book real quick. G.I. Joe is the code name for America's daring, highly trained Special Mission Force. Its purpose, to defend human freedom against Cobra, the ruthless organization determined to take over the world. Notice they dropped terrorist. Well, you know the story. But now, Cobra may have found their most versatile weapon yet. Can G.I. Joe even stop the Aladdin Initiative? Find out in this special Saturday morning send-up based on the classic 1980s cartoon and brought to you by the superstar creative team of Erik Burnham, Dan Schoening, and Luis Antonio Delgado. So this plays out like a Weather Dominator miniseries. It's 5 issues, therefore it'd be 5 episodes. The gist of it is Cobra acquires the Aladdin's lamp, gets 3 wishes. He wishes for 5 giant bats, meaning the bats, the soldiers that they create. Then he wishes to reinforce them, and then he wishes for basically all of the G.I. Joes to become Cobra, but that the genie sort of mixes it around, and the episode, or I'm sorry, the series ends with a giant battle between basically every single G.I. Joe and every single Cobra on the island, and then Shipwreck, everyone's favorite Joe, saves the day to the point where at the end, he's the only one that remembers the entire ordeal. And bada bing, bada boom, that's pretty much the story. Zach, what did you think of this story overall? Did it feel like a G.I. Joe story to you?
Well, I can wholeheartedly say it does, because I read it to Bodhi earlier today in character, doing all the voices of all the characters to the best of my ability. I say I'm a very poor man's, like a homeless man's version of G.I. Joe characters on the street. But I read it to him in character, and he was like riveted, And this is an 8-year-old kid that's currently obsessed with Minecraft and Pokemon. So for him to be like right back into the G.I. Joe universe by just like totally absorbing all the storylines, that proves to me how good it is. It is like the most. I echo what Diallo was saying. I've never seen anything like this. I think it's actually perfect for TV Obscura, because I don't think I don't think that many people know about this miniseries.
Yeah.
I didn't see it like advertised anywhere. The only reason I know about it is because of you, Corey. So I thought it was fantastic. It's debatable as to whether Shipwreck is the most popular Joe in the series. It's interesting, though, that he was the one to kind of have the final words. Technically, he didn't, if you know what I'm saying, at the end. But, he got in the G.I. Joe universe. Shipwreck had one of the creepiest episodes of all time, one of the most popular episodes.
That episode traumatized me as a kid. The one, what was that one called where he got captured and then people were melting?
There's No Place Like Springfield.
That's right.
That's the part 1 and 2. It was the I'm actually looking at I have the original Rhino G.I. Joe DVD sets that came out. And it is like it's from season 1, it's the finale of season 1, basically season 1 part 2.
No shit.
Yeah. So for him I think Neil Ross was the name, the voice actor for Shipwreck. Mm-hmm. But he's like, it's such an iconic voice. And I mean, I love this series. I don't want to, obviously we'll go all over, we'll shift it between the 3 of us, but just every character is so faithful. Again, I agree with what Diallo said. It looks like it was lifted off of the cartoon. I've never seen anything like this, and I'm so glad they did it. I wish after I was done, I got sad because I'm like, that's it. They're not going to do anymore.
Yeah,
because it's a great story. It's a great story. It's a really great story.
Yeah, Diallo, what did you think of this particular story? How does it hold up to the other ones? The Mass Device, the Weather Dominator, Serpentor, the movie, all of them. Where does this stand for you?
So I feel like for me the Mass Device was like peak, well done story in terms of just like action and adventure and moving forward. And the other series kind of decreased in quality. Still loved them. Watched the Weather Dominator a billion times. But the Mass Device is sort of like my standard, right? And so I actually felt like this felt more in spirit with between that and the Weather Dominator. It was funny because I actually I didn't even know about this because unless you were talking about it, right? So when I picked it up to start reading, I actually didn't know what I was actually in for. And as I was going through, I realized, oh, this is like in 5 parts. This is giving me that feeling I had that very first time I watched it on Monday, and then it came on the next day, and I was looking forward to the next day, and I had that feeling as I was reading this. So I was like, oh, today's Monday, and this one's Tuesday, and, going to the next parts. The part with the genie actually made it feel more authentic G.I. Joe because it doesn't, like, if I were to write it, I wouldn't have written that. I just wouldn't have thought to write it, right? But, like, it was perfect. G.I. Joe went off into those realms every once in a while, and it just feels valid, And I loved that, and it was, like, fun to watch how it played out.
Yeah. I feel the same way as you guys do. I feel like this would fit perfectly with all the other G.I. Joe miniseries and everything. As a kid, I probably would not have liked the genie aspect of it because I always liked things to be more serious, more, just warlike or whatever. But as I become an adult, I'm like, no, I enjoy the whimsy. I enjoy the fact that it's out there, man. It's like, why would Cobra Commander wish for giant bats and everything? It's like, and then just 5 of them. And I like the little banter he has with Destro. He's like, whose idea was it to make a unit like 5 basically? And then Destro's like, this is probably the same person that haggled the price with me. Basically, you, Cobra Commander, But so in going to that, Zach, you already touched on it. Diallo, how do you think that the writing team captured the voice, even though in your head, like the talking style of the characters and everything like that? Do you think they captured the feel of it?
Yeah, I think more so for Cobra than G.I. Joe. And that's not a knock on the writers. I just think that the Cobra characters are a lot more dynamic and have a lot more personality, I think. And so, definitely with Cobra Commander, the asides that Destro and Baroness make feel season 2 or 3 when they weren't as in the forefront, and you had other characters that had a little bit more screen time. But yeah, the Tomax and Zaymot, when they had their little exchange a little bit later, felt cool. Obviously Shipwreck, he came across great. It helped that I literally had all of their voices in my head while I was reading, and that was actually a really fun part of reading this. But yeah, I think they did a great job. And
what about Swift? What about Quick Kick?
Quick Kick, it's actually funny because Quick Kick, and again, this isn't a knock, he didn't feel like the Quick Kick I know, but I don't know if my memory is right because I always think of him as making movie references and like doing voices. And so that you can't really capture that on the page.
Yeah, and so my takeaway, and so actually I'm going to defer to Zach on this one, but my takeaway when I was reading it, and I think it was kind of like you, I was like, I don't know if this feels like Quick Kick to me, or if I don't remember Quick Kick sort of like what his gimmick was, that he was quoting movies. I don't know if I ever really paid attention to him. Probably to what you said, Diallo, the Cobra characters were always a bit more dynamic and interesting to me. Not going to lie to you, my least favorite G.I. Joe of all time is Shipwreck. I just never loved him.
All right, this is ending. That's a wrap.
But
we're shutting this down.
That being said, like, even if he was never my favorite, I still get nostalgic, pangs in my heart when I see him here. I'm like, oh, Shipwreck, But Quick Kick, Zach, how did they capture him right? Was that how he was in the cartoon?
Well, yeah, you're both right. I mean, like, he would do like his he did a whole lot of Bogart.
Frankly, Betsy, I don't give a darn.
Yeah, he would do stuff like that. I think he was introduced in the second miniseries, The Weather Dominator, when he was like filming a commercial in the like, in the Arctic or something. But one of my more favorite episodes of his, and he's not the ultimate star, it's really Storm Shadow, but the Excalibur episode where Storm Shadow finds Excalibur and they have an epic battle on top of a castle. And Spirit's involved. Actually, Spirit was with Quick Kick, like when they worked off of each other. That's when Quick Kick kind of shined, in my opinion. As much as I love Quick Kick, I didn't really always like the jokey aspect of Quick Kick. So I preferred Spirit over Quick Kick. So I feel like I would have actually, to be honest with you, preferred a little bit more Spirit than Quick Kick, but I know they wanted to go more of the comedic, sense. It was interesting to see kind of some of the characters that they decided to use, because Mainframe, for example, Mainframe came on more so in season 2 than he did in season 1. In season 1, I think it was like Breaker, I think was the computer guy, and he was throughout the whole thing. And then Mainframe came on towards the tail end of the series with Dial Tone. He was another one too. And I was like, wait, you got 2 satellite guys? We got 2 tech guys? Why do you have to have 2? And I wasn't a huge Dial Tone fan.
I love Dial Tone. He was one of my favorite Joe toys as a kid. Well, he's the one with the big backpack, right?
Yeah,
and
it's
then,
like red and white. Is that one? Yeah.
No, he had like a beret and a mustache. He kind of looked like Dabney Coleman from Cloak and Dagger.
Then I'm thinking of the other one then with the big backpack. No, I think that was Dial Tone.
He did. Yeah, he had a big backpack.
Yeah,
they both. I think they both had big backpacks. But
but
Mainframe
brings all the boys to the eye.
Mainframe had a cool storyline with Zorana in the second season because it's one episode called Computer Complications where they fell in love.
Yeah.
And it's a really cool story because the way it ends on a romantic tip, like, star-crossed lovers, so to speak. And then it comes back around in the second half. The second half of season 2 does not, you can already tell, like, the wheels are starting to fall off with G.I. Joe a little bit. It doesn't hold up as well. And they start using the same core. They would use, like, the new wave of toys, right? Yeah. So it was interesting to me that they used Mainframe. I'm assuming it's because he was one of the more popular ones for them. I'm surprised they didn't use, like, a Beachhead, for example, because I know Beachhead,
Was he even in this?
He is.
Was he? Okay.
He's in it. He's like in one of the group shots. Yeah. The fact that Gung Ho is used he has one line. It's just, that's interesting to me.
Yeah,
of course,
I wouldn't be surprised if this is not like a collection of Dan Schoening's favorite characters, as their toys that he played with as a kid.
I think so. I was just kind of pointing out too. You were talking about kind of the banter between Cobra characters, and I agree with you, Diallo. I think that Cobra was always much more colorful, right? And I love that Duke is the focus, as he should be, in my opinion. But they reference the gods below, because when Hawk's like, "What are we doing out here?" And that was classified or whatever. The gods below, and Corey, you'd said like how a lot of you like the more war aspect episodes, but there were these fantasy episodes. Excalibur's one of them for sure. That's a really wild episode. But the gods below is fucking crazy because they go into down under this pyramid where Cobra Commander wants all the gold, and they meet like Osiris and Osiris, the Egyptian god of the dead, know, and I think Iset, I think, is another one there too. And like at one point, I think one of the Joe characters gets set on fire, and then Bazooka and
Ripcord.
What's Bazooka's sidekick? They're always together. He's
Ripcord. You said it right? Yeah.
Ripcord, yeah, right. Is it Ripcord?
Yeah, Bazooka. So. Yeah, Bazooka and Ripcord, and he's the one with the big helmet, right? Mm-hmm. And the mustache.
Yeah. Yeah, is it Ripcord?
I say just say yes and move on.
Okay, sorry. Anyways, yeah, like they get like thrown off and they start drifting from the universe into Earth's atmosphere, basically. shit like that. It's so great. I love that. I love that they went with a fantastic storyline because they did fantastic storylines.
Yeah, I mean, I think you're right. I mean, even in the Mass Effect, they have, Roadblock fighting those vines that are attacking and everything.
That's amazing.
Yeah, and I think I said Mass Effect, by the way, not the mass device. Freudian slip. But yeah, this does feel like it fits right there with it. I liked that reference because at one point when everyone gets teleported there by the genie, Hawk's like, yeah, I was just briefing the president. Why am I here now? And why is this happening? And I liked Duke's, explanation of it. And he's like, oh shit, we don't need like more supernatural shit going on. But I also I enjoyed the fact that Cobra's plan when he sent the bats to DC, Paris, France, and Tokyo, he sent the giant bats to attack. I like the fact that he's like, it's not for the money, it's for the fear and the respect. And then you also find out that it was a sort of a front for them to also steal the gold from those cities. And I was like, and he calls a retreat and everything. And I was like, This is the Cobra Commander that I want to see. I don't want to see him always be a bumbling idiot. I like that he had a plan here, and I like that it actually worked out for him, and I like that he finally said, it's not about the fucking money. It's about the power, and the fear. And I was like, that's cool. I like that.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, Diallo, what do you think about how they portrayed Cobra Commander and just his plan in general and how it was executed?
Yeah, it's funny because I felt like that level of competence was so beyond anything he ever portrayed ever in the show. I liked it. I liked the idea of it, but it actually was the only moment really in the entire book here that he seemed like he actually knew what he was doing. But the idea of it makes it make sense in terms of like the world building, I guess, that because I actually kind of I wondered that too, like why would he, like, there is a general question that has always been around, and they probably have answered it in some way, shape, or form in some other form of media, but like, what's Cobra's deal? Like,
yeah.
And I think they do answer a little bit in the G.I. Joe movie. Maybe I kind of reject that movie on certain premises, so I don't necessarily count all their reasons why Cobra exists. But just like as a terrorist organization, what's your end? What's your goal? Like, are you trying to get resources? They never really kind of went into that, and just having Cobra Commander just basically say we're just a bunch of assholes. I was like, okay, like, I dig that. Like, I dig, like, I understand what motivates you, just kind of like Star Wars, like with the Empire. They're just evil, Yeah. And, so yeah, I liked that, the idea, even though I didn't quite feel like that moment was along his character.
Yeah, and I see what you're saying. It's almost like Erik Burnham sort of trying to retcon a little bit of past G.I. Joes, because you can totally see the creative team being like, look, let's make Cobra Commander a little bit less of a buffoon, because as kids we didn't like that he was a buffoon. I get the thought process behind it, but yet it almost made Cobra Commander a little bit smarter than he normally is.
And yeah, because it kind of came out of nowhere too. Like, I was like, "What? That's solid. That was a solid plan."
It's a good plan. Who came up with this plan?
But then it doesn't, the problem with it is it doesn't jibe with him making these wishes that he can't. You know what I mean? That's where it didn't fit for me. Like, yeah. It just, like, he's on one hand, he's like, actually the point is he's a buffoon, but here he actually has like the most brilliant. I was like, oh, yeah, all right.
It's kind of a buffoon with that first wish, making those bats super tall.
Yeah.
Like, okay, I get it. I mean,
sounded like a little kid, Yeah.
And make me some Mego toys.
Come on. I like that, like, sci-fi on the Joe team. Once they destroyed that one, he started like basically doing an autopsy on it, and I liked how he came up with like, oh, they didn't build them like this. They basically blew them up in size, and of course, like, Duke's like, well, that's ridiculous, and and he's like, well, they've done ridiculous things in the past.
Right.
It weirdly fits, and I think if you watch the show, I just accepted all of these. I think probably the hardest thing for me to accept was that Cobra Commander had a well thought out plan.
Yeah, and this coming from Sci-Fi, who's like, another one where I was like, oh, I don't mind Sci-Fi at all, even though if you paint Sci-Fi all black, and he comes with a variant head with the figures that came out maybe 15, 20 years ago, it's the Wraith figure.
Oh, okay. Did they give him a different helmet than the one he sort of originally had?
Well, they give him 2 helmets.
Okay.
They give him,
Okay.
You can switch out the heads, and so you put the one with the full helmet on, and it's the Wraith. And I'm like, oh shit! If you paint this all black, it's the Wraith, even with like the leg, because he's got like the leg braces and everything. It's amazing.
I real quick, I used to use my Sci-Fi as a substitute for RoboCop.
Perfect. Oh, it totally looks like RoboCop. By the way, it's Alpine.
I was
Alpine,
gonna
not Ripcord.
I was gonna say that a little bit. I was waiting for you guys to go.
Because
Yeah.
Bazooka was like, Alpine, where are we going? Alpine. So, I agree with you. Like Cobra Commander almost is they're righting some wrongs with Cobra Commander. I feel like they wanted to do then the first half of the G.I. Joe the movie. Making him a little bit more dominant, looking somewhat dominant in that in the opening, the beautiful opening scene of G.I. Joe the movie. But I also want to point out too that this story is like they cover so much ground with so many characters, and they do such a great job doing it. It never feels like it's ham-fisted, like they're just shoving a bunch of characters down your throat. All the storylines make sense. They don't deviate the characters from the way they were portrayed in the cartoon overall, except for Cobra Commander at times, right? And I love that. The relationships are the same. Alpine and Bazooka, Duke and Scarlet, Lady J and Flint.
Yeah.
And I love that they keep those intact. I just think that's masterfully done.
Zach, let me ask you something. Where in the timeline, if you were to guess, like where does this take place? I'm thinking pre the movie, because
Pre-season,
because mainly for me it was because of Cobra Temple versus the Terrordrome. You know what I mean? We don't really see the Terrordrome here. We see the Cobra Temple, and that always reminds me of like the mass device and whatnot.
Yeah, this to me feels like before season 2, before Rise, Serpentor, Rise. Because Serpentor's not around.
Because Rise, Serpentor, Rise was season 2's premiere, was it not?
Yeah.
Okay.
And the Dreadnoks had, that core, the core Dreadnoks of, I do notice that, Zorana and Zart, the other brother.
Yeah, I saw Thrasher in there, the guy who drives the car. The Dreadnought car, he's in there. Well, let me ask you this, guys, both of you. I'll throw it to Diallo first. So Dan Schoening on the Ghostbusters run is famous in the comic book industry for just packing in so many Easter eggs into each issue. A lot of times in that comic book, you would see the Ghostbusters like busting, ghosts that were actually toys. They never made it onto the cartoon, but they were toys. And there's so many references. Did you pick out anything, Diallo, in here? Did you notice any cameos from any characters in the background or anything that sort of jumped out at you?
Absolutely not.
Zach, did you notice any cameos?
No, actually. And there were times when I was trying to look for that, because...
Well, all right, Zach, can I ask you specifically, did you notice the Visionaries cameo?
I did notice... Yeah, you know what? I did notice that.
Okay,
yeah, when Duke is
in
the arena.
In the arena, the two gladiators that he fights before that creature, those are clearly Visionary characters from that comic book / toy line / cartoon.
Yeah, actually, they both are. They're totally Visionaries.
Yep.
And... which is great. I know the first one looks like Leoric, the one in blue. I don't know who the other one is offhand.
And then in the final battle, there's a good page that has a couple people, random stuff like this Cobra character. I don't actually know who she is. That's right in the middle there. And then there's some more cameo stuff in that other panel there. He doesn't. Dan Schoening didn't seem to put as much into this as he does in Ghostbusters. I don't know if there was some sort of time constraint or not. I feel like if I had any kind of critique of this, the final battle I think sounded fantastic on paper, whereas every single G.I. Joe was going to fight every single Cobra. I don't know if they had the time or the ability to pull it off because it doesn't feel as populated as I thought it maybe could have been.
I didn't have a problem with it. I wasn't just maybe it's just because understanding that you drawing panel after panel of a big battle isn't like kind of feasible or doable. Yeah. So I felt like it communicated a big showdown brawl. Is that Matt Tracker? Is that on that one cameo where you showed?
Well, it looks like there's also a female Native American character there, maybe a Joe that I don't know who that is either.
Oh yeah, huh? Yeah, I have no idea who that would be.
And guys and gals, I totally apologize. This doesn't have any page numbers, but it's in the fifth issue. It's the battle at the end. There's like this one page on the right hand side that has 4 panels, but 2 of the panels have a lot of characters in it that I don't know.
I think that the female Joe, the one who has like the pigtails, I think that could be Mara.
Okay.
From the, what is it, Spell of the Siren, or not Spell of the Siren. It might be Spell of the Siren. That's when like all the women are kind of in charge. And then Memories of Mara, I think that's the one where, again, Shipwreck falls in love with the mermaid. And I think she ends up kind of like they turn her into a Joe. I feel like that could be. I could be totally off, and I probably am. But that's where I'm pulling straws, where I think it's like these have been featured in the cartoon.
Yeah.
All of these characters. I think all of these characters have been featured in the cartoon series proper, versus like variant figures that came out when Hasbro released the 25th anniversary figures.
Yeah, okay.
Because I don't think they went that deep, which I appreciate and respect. I think they kept it, and also too, when you ask like timeline wise, it's tricky because a lot of the characters that premiered in season 2, like Leatherneck and Iceberg and Wetsuit, like those guys were like season 2 proper characters as well, but that's still before Sergeant Slaughter was introduced, and that's still before Serpentor was created. So and also Dr. Mindbender's not in this either. So yeah, I think this is trying to keep it within that time frame, which I appreciate. I still think I love all things G.I. Joe, but I appreciate that they didn't put Lifeline in this, because Lifeline is one of the few characters I really have a problem with and cannot stand. Why would a pacifist be in G.I. Joe? It makes no freaking sense.
It's personal. Yeah. It's personal.
Glad it is personal with me. You know why, Diallo? They gave that guy like 3 or 4 dominant episodes towards the tail end of the series, and I'm like, why are you giving Lifeline?
I know. I actually remember I watched one with you.
You did.
You and Bodhi, and you were ranting about being a pacifist. I didn't know that you actually had legit issue until now. Because in my brain, I was like, well, yeah, that makes it interesting to write stories for, because there's such a dilemma. So that's why you make them that way. But logically speaking, of course, he wouldn't be a...
I just don't give him so many storylines, so many great stories. Like, you wasted like 3 or 4 episodes on this guy, in my opinion. That's my little rant.
So... like sort of the final note that I have here, just a little random stuff here and there. I did notice that Shipwreck's bird makes quotes Han Solo. It says, "Never tell me the odds." Yeah. when he's running toward. Was it Deep Six? That shark ship that he's using that goes underwater. Is that Deep Six?
Deep Six.
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah, he talks like this.
Yeah.
Deep Six talks like this.
Clearly, Dan Schoening loved that toy as a kid too, because it's doing.
The shark was awesome.
I had it too. I I loved it as well, and they did some interesting stuff with it. And then my final note is, like I said, at the end of it, like he's the only one. Shipwreck is the only one that remembers the whole ordeal, and I think that makes it fun. It makes it so it can just sort of fit anywhere in season 1. It could fit in between, episodes 13 and 14 or something. It doesn't matter. And I dig that. Hey everybody, Corey here. I just want to let you know that we'll be right back after these short messages.
Imagine being one of the last people on Earth, being trapped alone with something not human. Something always watching. Something always waiting. What would you do? Where would you run? Where would you hide if you were haunted for 7 winters alone?
Podcasting After Dark presents 7 Winters Alone, a dystopian haunted house story by David Irons.
Available now in paperback and ebook.
On the winter solstice, when the lasting darkness threatens to descend upon the land of Atalan once united, Magi in training, Wilt Garen, and his shepherd, warrior in training, Bredain Adair, must find an ancient lost weapon before the ultimate ancient evil returns to the world of Eos. Hi there, I'm Adiella Jackson, writer of the First Noel's Chronicle podcast. The First Noel is an epic, family-friendly adventure told in serialized form. Think of it as Lord of the Rings meets, well, Christmas. Join us each week for the next thrilling chapter of The First Noel, now available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Audible, and all major podcasting apps, as well as Kindle Vella if you want to take a read. Thanks, and see you in Atalan. The Winter Tell is almost here.
And now, back to the show. Before we jump into the PSAs, because guys and gals, don't think that they didn't include some PSAs in here, and I want to leave some time to discuss them sort of as a whole. But as far as the story itself goes, is there any other notes or anything that you guys want to touch on that we haven't yet? Diallo?
The only thing that I felt was wholly inauthentic was Snake Eyes and Storm Shadow going head to head in that final battle. Now, I know we all, from the comic and through a lot of the lore, Snake Eyes and Storm Shadow go head to head. Their histories are intertwined. But my recollection is on the cartoon that it was actually often Spirit versus Storm Shadow.
I knew, yep, that was my recollection as well.
Yeah, and I only really remember that because I was always like, Snake Eyes and Storm Shadow should be fighting whenever I was watching the cartoon. But for whatever reason, it was Spirit and Storm Shadow. And as much as just behind me, I have Snake Eyes and Storm Shadow amigos staring at each other on my podium with all my other action figures. But I actually would have appreciated, for like authenticity's sake, that it was Storm Shadow and Spirit that were going head to head across that little jump shot where they were jumping into battle.
It almost makes you think that like what you remember gets clouded by what you think should have been there. And yeah, you're right. I even remembered it too when I was reading it. And I was like, oh, Spirit should really be spending more time fighting Storm Shadow in the comic books, because same as you. As a kid, I liked Spirit a lot. I thought he was a really cool character, and I liked that he fought Storm Shadow because I felt like that made him even more badass. But just like you said, also, I think all three of us read the comics as well. We knew the backstory, and I think we always expected Storm Shadow to fight Snake Eyes. Now, we got that awesome showdown in, what was that cartoon called, Zach? Not Sigma 6. It was the other one, the other G.I. Joe one. Resolute?
Oh, Renegades?
No,
Renegades?
Resolute.
Oh, Resolute, yes.
Yeah, that has a great battle between Snake Eyes and Storm Shadow that I think just really paid off.
Yeah.
Zach, thoughts on the Spirit versus Storm Shadow conundrum in this?
Well, yeah, I think it was the Weather Dominator episode, miniseries where Storm Shadow and Spirit had their epic showdown on that volcanic mountain, and where they basically had a truce. It was a really, really cool moment in the series, and I agree with you, Diallo. I actually feel like Snake Eyes didn't really get. I love Snake Eyes on many levels, and I don't feel like he got really the attention he deserved. I feel like they could have given him a little bit different storyline, maybe put him with Scarlet. They always had a great connection there, have him with Scarlet and Gung Ho on that ATV or whatever they're on. Yeah. And I think it's only fitting that Shipwreck wraps up this comic book because I love him. I know Diallo does too, and I know not everybody does, case in point with you. And I think that's kind of cool. I think it's kind of funny that you wrap up with, he was always kind of everywhere in every series. It wasn't until the second, well, you really think about it too. The first season was like, I don't know, 60 something
episodes. Yeah. Because when you said season 2 was Serpentor, I was like, wait, what? Because I was thinking that was like, it would have been season 3 or 4 or something like that.
And it only lasted those 2 seasons, which is crazy. They did the G.I. Joe. That's when G.I. Joe season 3 was when they totally changed over and they introduced characters like Corey's favorite, the Alley Viper, right? But season 1, Shipwreck was all over the place and so many episodes. And he actually had a great, I think when his character gets introduced in maybe the Weather Dominator.
No, it was, I just watched him. It was the Mass Device. He was at a Cobra village,
cantina, right?
Like cantina, yeah. And I like that because I like seeing what the Cobra grunts are doing when they're not doing their Cobra thing. You know what I mean? I thought that was really cool. And yeah, Shipwreck was there as sort of like a mercenary. So he was, I guess, was he never a proper Joe? Like, was he never someone who went up through the Navy and went through proper channels to become a G.I. Joe?
Well, I mean, he's always been Navy,
right?
But no, he didn't get brought into Joe's until Snake Eyes brought him in. So, Snake Eyes was the one. You're right. But they had a cool, the way he was introduced in that series was cool because he was more like kind of down and dirty for a while.
Oh no, he was like Han Solo when they introduced him. Like his feet were up on the table. He's like, these guys are trouble. Yeah, if you want something, you come to me, type of thing. And yes, as a kid, I didn't really care for him, but as an adult, I get the appeal from a writer's standpoint. He was just oozing with personality, and I'm sure he was fun as fuck to write. And I'm sure the reason, Snake Eyes really isn't in this much, this comic book much, is because as a writer, and I'm sure Diallo can talk, attest to this maybe, well, what are you supposed to do with him here? You know what I mean? Like Diallo, what could you do with as a writer in comic book form versus, cartoon form? Like, can you really do much more with Snake Eyes here to beef him up?
In the way that it is, no. I was thinking the only way you could give him any more screen time is you'd have to make his own side little journey like he had in the Mass Device, right? He had his whole thing going on. And a lot of that is because you have to dedicate telling the story without any words. And so you would actually need more space, I think, to do that. And this book didn't have that. So as much as I love Snake Eyes, I wasn't mad that because you kind of understand that he can't speak. But they used him to great effect in another piece of the book. And I really can't wait to talk about that one.
I just want to add one more quick thing too about Snake Eyes, and I want to correct myself. I think it was Flint and Mutt that brought Shipwreck to the Joes, and I think it was the Weather Dominator when Snake Eyes and Shipwreck went off, because there was like the one episode where Shipwreck and Snake Eyes are at the club and Snake Eyes is breakdancing.
Yeah.
Yeah, but anyways, Please get to those PSAs.
Yeah, so every issue, episode, I should say, has a PSA, and so there are 4 of them here. Oh, I guess it was a 4-issue, not 5 issues, but okay. So we have one. I'll kind of give you the premise for all 4 of them, and we can kind of talk about them individually. One is Mainframe and the Online Troll. The other one is Snake Eyes and the Comic Thief. There's one that's Law and Order, and I just called this one and the Little Serial Killer. And there's the last one is a very sad one with Lady J and Flint. So all of these, I felt like it was tongue-in-cheek, right? Like, it was kind of tongue-in-cheek. It was kind of like... Well,
totally.
So the first one was funny because it was like Mainframe kind of like putting an online troll into his place, which is great.
It was awesome.
The second one, which Diallo will elaborate, Snake Eyes. So Snake Eyes basically stops a comic book thief, but he doesn't say anything, and the kid just basically talks himself into returning the comic book just from a guy standing in front of him. Diallo, how the genius of that one.
It was so good.
It was so good.
It was so good.
Because Snake Eyes doesn't say anything.
I was actually reading all of this on an airplane. And I had to like stop myself from just like laughing out loud at that one page. It was just so deliciously brilliant, sharp, clever. It said so much on so many different levels. The kid talking himself out of it was just, I mean, it's so good. It's so good.
And I like how the kid was like, "Oh, Snake Eyes, you're my favorite G.I. Joe." You know?
Oh man. But it's like I can't stop laughing, but like it's not like over the top like laughter or humor. It's just like when you read between all the lines, there's so much going on with it. It was just like it's so good.
And I gotta say, like in the first one, what I picked up on was the one with Mainframe and the Online Troll.
Yeah.
They drew that computer to look like a computer from the 80s. And it had so many extra, things to it. It looked amazing, but at the same time, it completely looked like an 80s cartoon computer to me. Zach, which one was your favorite of the 4?
I mean, it's hard. I must say like you said, the serial killer who likes shooting a slingshot at animals. There's just the final line where, order or law is telling him to basically knock it off. And the kid's like, I never thought of that. I never thought of it that way. Law, now I know. And Law and Order's like, and Law goes, but seriously, I see you pelt anything else with that slingshot. Our next conversation is gonna be different.
Because they never added anything before, but you could tell that this one was like, one of the creative teams was like, no, we're gonna make a hard stance on that, and that was great. And then at the last one, Lady J is all dressed up, looking beautiful, and I like how she's talking about the story that came before it. She was like, hey, the story kind of got wrapped up because of some sort of good fortune, good luck, but you can't always count on luck. You need to have a backup plan. And she's looking beautiful, and she's like now, and then Flint like sticks his head out and he's like, oh babe, sorry I didn't make the appointment or the reservation to the restaurant. How about some MREs, and she just like looks at the screen and just is like crestfallen.
Well, and that was a little He-Man kind of PSA, because He-Man always did the ones like in today's episode we learned this, and I like that they kind of did that type of thing. Mm-hmm. But yeah, she's like, no, that talk about being in a shitty relationship. Right? She goes, lucky me.
Lucky me, and it's like all small and everything, and you can just tell. I was like, this is great. So much personality in those PSAs. It's fantastic.
It's funny because it breaks. It sort of like breaks the tone of the rest of the book, right? But it's so safe to do that because obviously it's not telling the story. It's just like the last page with the PSA. So yeah, it was a great opportunity to like give a little bit of that snarky but still felt like it was like it felt like it still, if you weren't paying attention, it could still fit into like a PSA thing. Like on a surface, it looks like that when you really kind of look at it and think about it. You're like, this person's being an asshole.
And they almost become more and more sort of out of the norm. I almost felt like the first one with the online troll is something that they would have created had they had the internet at the time. And then it just gets more and more ridiculous to the point where it's just a commentary on Lady Jane Flint's relationship.
Pretty much. I do want to point out too, I used to like pick my top 5 to go into battle with. Who would be my top 5 Joes I'd take with me on a mission, right, when I was a kid. And the final image of the comic book proper is Snake Eyes, Shipwreck, Quick Kick, and Spirit. Those are definitely in my top 4. At least they were back in the day. I mean, that's iconic right there.
Yeah, I bet. I'm sure if we asked Dan Schoening and Erik Burnham, who their favorites were, we'd probably see them on the cover, right? Right here. But
well, really quick, like I think you mentioned it as well, but interspersed between the comics are those great kind of one-off images, artist renditions of the shows. Not all of them, I think, are like totally up to par, but it's cool to see variations on the different artists kind of giving their take on, G.I. Joe characters.
Yeah, I bet those were probably alternate covers. I'm sure Dan Schoening did the proper cover, and then they might have had like alternate covers. And yeah, I'm with you. I didn't love all of them, but even the ones I don't love, I always appreciate seeing someone else's take on it and everything. But at the end of the day, Dan Schoening's ability to mimic the cel-shaded, animation style, that's what I'm here for. I'm not really here for the other artist styles because I grew up reading G.I. Joe comic books with other artist styles and everything. But we all three of us said at the beginning, we never had this though. We never had something that accurately basically continued the TV show, the cartoon itself and everything. And I hope that IDW comes back around to this. I don't know if they'll keep like doing other series. I'm sure it's all depending on how well these sell or whatever, but I do hope that they swing back around to this. I'm curious to see if they do a full-on real Ghostbusters one, because they sort of dabbled in that with the Ghostbusters Get Real. And if I could plug that, guys and gals, if you just want to pick up an awesome trade of the Ghostbusters comic book, just look up Ghostbusters Get Real. I'm thinking at this point it's probably about 5 to 8 years old, but you can get that trade, and right there you can see where this started. This Saturday morning cartoons, I guarantee you, started with Dan Schoening pulling off that amazing feat of making the real Ghostbusters come to life in the comic book and look exactly like the artwork. So just some final thoughts around the board, and throw out anything that we missed, anything that we didn't talk about, any bullet points that you guys have left over, and then throw your final thoughts out. Diallo, you first, buddy.
Well, I mentioned it a little bit earlier, but I was like, oh, they didn't have Beachhead. He was actually like a pretty big part of the show, I guess, towards the end of season 1.
Yeah. I don't remember when he was introduced.
He used to like kind of lead. He was like the 4th leader or whatever when Flint and
he was 4th in command.
Yeah, so he was in quite a few episodes. So I just like, oh yeah, he was barely in this.
Season 2 mostly.
Yeah, and that was just an observation. But no, I mean I really. I came into this not knowing anything, and was like, from the first page, I was like, oh, this is literally like the cartoon, not like I wasn't reading a comic book that was a G.I. Joe story. I was like, from the opening page, I was like, oh, this is actually an episode. And like I said, I thought that they were cells at first. But so it was a real joy to actually read this, because it actually feels like the first thing since G.I. Joe ended that was made in the spirit of G.I. Joe.
More so than the live action movies and everything.
Like the movies, one thing of it, one of the biggest things I don't like about the movie, I don't know which one, the first or second, but anyways, they missed to me, what was the entire point of G.I. Joe. It's not that it was the army. It was sort of like the army meets superheroes.
Yeah.
It was sort of, and like that movie just didn't get that, because they all appeared in their uniform for their specialty, even if it didn't make sense that Frostbite should be wearing his entire snow gear in the base, but they each of them, embodied some expertise, and they dressed like it was the Justice League. And the movies just didn't get that. The movies just were like, oh, let's put The Rock in here and give him a gun, and he didn't even rhyme like
Roadblock.
Yeah,
which we got some rhyme and Roadblock in this.
Yeah, that was great. That was great. And I mean, those little touches like that, like the rhyming Roadblock and the what's the parrot's name? Shipwreck's parrot.
Polly.
Yeah, they even had like the Timber, Snake Eyes' wolf that he came with the wolf. I think he was in the Mass Device episode.
Yeah,
miniseries, and then it was my man Ace. Ace was one of my favorites. Like when I played video games, I put Ace as my name, and so it was good to actually see him get more screen time. And so. Yeah, it was just it was really fun. It was a really fun read. Like, again, I didn't know what I was in for, but as soon as I started reading it, I was like, oh man, I'm gonna read all of this, because it's not. I don't actually read a lot of comic books anymore, and sometimes they feel a little too dense. And but at this, I actually was surprised. I read the entire thing in my flight, which was an hour and a half. So
yeah, it's a real easy read. It's as far as comics go, it's a real easy read. I read it. I think I've actually read it 3 times now in 2 days, because I was just like, well, I burned through it so quick. Let me just kind of try to commit it to memory, type of thing. So, Zach, what are your final thoughts, and anything we missed, overall?
Yeah, I mean, obviously there's characters I wish they had put in, like Snow Job or Torpedo, but they're not in there.
Those are two of my favorites.
I like those guys a lot too. I wish this wasn't a one-off. I wish they would continue it. I would actually love, I don't know if it'll ever happen. And I kind of feel like they're missing the boat. They're missing the opportunity on doing it. But if they did a quick miniseries like A World Without End, where they explore that world like a prequel, and the Joes are not dead yet, and they're actually just all in hiding. There's your miniseries right there. Why have they not done that fucking miniseries? There's your what if. There's your multiverse. Come on, that is the Buzz. Whoever wrote that, whether it was Buzz Dixon or somebody else, it's just there. It's ripe for the picking. Go for it. That's my final thought.
No, I think you actually just brought up a fantastic point. As much as I enjoyed this, I think that would have made for a better story. What if they go back, or we just follow whoever it was? Was it Dusty or whoever stayed over there?
It was it was such a ragtag group. It was
all the ones
one
that
of them
wanted
I
to get
called
rid
Dustin.
of the toys.
He looks Clutch. Clutch was one of them. Grunt and Steeler.
Yeah, Steeler. That's right.
Where he's losing his mind.
All the first gen toy figures that they wanted to get rid of.
Yeah, but what a great way to do it. And that's such a cool story. Because remember, those were the characters that were dead over there, and you even saw them as skeletons and whatnot. I was like, that was cool. But I think you're right, Zach. I didn't even think about that. That would have been great for this. I don't know if it would have been good as sort of a first entry.
No.
But if they do another one, I think that would be a perfect one to pick up, and then they could have a field day and do whatever the hell they want to, with that. I think that would be awesome. My final thoughts on this, it's great. Same as you two. I was just I'm reading this and I'm like, I can't believe this exists, just so happy that this exists. And I think anyone who's a G.I. Joe fan should have no problem picking this up. Pick up the trade. I think you'll burn through it. It's all ages. I mean, you can show it to your kids. Anyone can read it. Just, have a basic understanding of G.I. Joe, and I think you'll have a good time with it. You'll get more mileage out of it, though, depending on how much, mileage you've already put into the G.I. Joe franchise. But I think the creative team hit it out of the park with this one. I never doubted in a million years that they wouldn't. I think it was always going to be written in the stars, because I love this team. I've been reading Ghostbusters since the IDW series started, and it's one of my favorite comic books of all time. And I'm just glad that this is out. I'm looking forward. I'll probably pick up the TMNT one. We won't discuss it on this show. TMNT was never I was never into the cartoon as a kid, but this concept, this idea is so, thrilling to me that I'll just pick up whichever ones they want to keep putting out, because it just fills me with nostalgia. And I think that's a big thing right now.
One hell of a drug, as I like to say.
One hell of a drug.
Do a Transformer one, by the way. That would be awesome.
I wouldn't be surprised if they are. I believe IDW owns the license to that. So who knows what the creative team on that one, because I don't think it's going to be the same creative team every time. I'm not 100% sure. I could be wrong about that. But we'll see, and I do hope that they keep moving forward. Guys and gals, I don't really keep up with comic book news, so something could have been announced for all I know. But I'm not quite sure, so we'll keep an eye out for it. But this was a blast. I'm glad that we had a chance to dive into this. The story itself is not very meaty, so it didn't really lend itself to have a 2-hour discussion or anything. It's a pretty simple story, and if you listen to our G.I. Joe the movie episode, you'll probably get out the full picture on the TV Obscura's love for G.I. Joe. But what about TV Obscura's love for everything that Diallo has going on? Well, that's just huge, ladies and gentlemen. What, Playboy, what you got going on?
I was like, me? What do I got going on? Oh, yeah, working diligently on the First Noel relaunch. Website's looking fantabulous. And working on a motion comic of Angel in the Dark. I believe you might have seen some images from the motion comic. Those are
looks
coming
amazing,
in.
by the way. Diallo previewed it
does.
for us. Wow.
Yep. So cool.
And Zach can speak to this too. I will be in about 3 weeks now. We'll be at LA Comic-Con running a panel.
Nice.
So, yeah. And,
very cool.
I'm going to go to your panel, Diallo.
And heckle? Are you going to heckle him?
It'll be super awkward if you do that.
Nice shirt.
Congratulations, buddy. That's awesome. I hope if there's a video or something, post it, and then I can reblog it or whatever.
Yeah, I got two of the people I got. One of them is someone you may have heard of before. His name's Larry Houston. He was basically the artist on the X-Men cartoons.
Oh, okay.
And he also worked, I found out the other day, he actually worked on the original comics for He-Man, Masters of the Universe, the ones that came in the books. I got a little story. I got a little story on how they created certain characters based on his input, and also just how they were coloring things. So it was a pretty cool story.
Does that have anything to do with Green Snake Teela?
No. Nothing to do with Green Snake.
I love Green Snake Teela. It's one of, for me, I don't really know the backstory on why she was like that originally, but it's one of my most intriguing childhood things. As a kid, I was always like, why is she green right here? She looks really cool.
Actually, that's actually a good question to ask when we having the panel, or when I talk to him. Maybe I'll see what he what he said. I know cool. I read comics, and sometimes you just knew they messed up on the coloring.
Yeah.
And Isn't that the story about the Hulk? Actually, he was originally supposed to be. They wanted him green, but the ink was wrong, so he just turned out gray.
Yeah.
So,
That's right. They want him green originally, then he became gray, and then when they got it right, they made him green.
Something like that.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, maybe that's all there was to that story, but I'll find out for you guys.
That's awesome. Congratulations, buddy. Zach, what's going on with you? Are you going to be attending LA Comic-Con?
Yes, $2 late fee. We'll have a panel at LA Comic-Con the first weekend of December, and we will be having a very special guest, actually 2 guests to be totally specific. One will be, his name is Brendan Hay. He is the co-creator, or he's the producer of the upcoming Gremlins Mogwai series for HBO Max.
Gotcha.
Which will be coming out next year. And the reason why we're bringing him on is because our ultimate guest will be none other than Joe Dante.
Nice.
And Joe Dante will be doing a little trip down memory lane with his filmography with us. And, I don't need to tell you guys who Joe Dante is. He's a living legend.
Yeah, go listen to our Burbs review.
Yeah, I mean, we don't need a laundry list of who he is. You know who he is. So yeah, we're gonna be there that first week of December.
I'm going to your panel.
Yeah, you better be. And oh my gosh, I mean, everything's going on right now on $2 late fee. We did a great retrospective on Teen Wolf 2. And had 3 amazing guests from that who told some wild stories. Mark Holton is one of them. Mark Holton you'll know as Francis from Pee-wee's Big Adventure and Leprechaun, and John Wayne Gacy, the John Wayne Gacy movie. But the dude is crazy. It's a great interview. So we've got so much stuff going on at $2 late fee. But come to LA Comic-Con. If you're unable to come to LA Comic-Con, well, we'll have a surprise for you in January, but I can't talk about that just yet.
Nice. Well, I think obviously I won't be there this year, but if you guys are doing panels at LA Comic-Con, maybe that'll be the con that we kind of because I know next year I'm going to try to have a pad presence at a con, but we have to be picky and choosy because it's expensive to do all that kind of stuff. So if this is going to become the norm and LA Comic-Con is sort of our place to land, then I'll start looking in next year into getting a booth for Podcast After Dark and whatnot. So I think that'd be a lot of fun, and actually we could podcast from there and do an episode from there and go to the panels and support everybody. So I think that'd be a lot of fun.
Oh yeah, it's gonna happen.
Yeah,
it's gonna happen.
Oh, yeah,
2023.
I like that plan. I like that plan.
Yeah.
Good stuff.
I think it'll be great. So this was a lot of fun. Make sure you check out our Podcast After Dark Patreon page because Zach and I are having a blast talking about every single movie John Carpenter has written and directed, his complete filmography. And this month we will be dropping Starman, which was a lot more fun than I ever thought it was going to be. So check that one out.
Yeah, and we're about to get into some of the, in my opinion, greatest John Carpenter movies of all the times.
We're coming up onto a chunk of awesomeness, starting with Big Trouble in Little China next month. So it's a lot of fun. That show is great. People are loving it. We've had a few signups and everything recently for that tier on Patreon. So thank you all so much for supporting that show. Thank you all so much for supporting TV Obscura. This is probably our runaway hit, non-review show. This is probably our biggest secondary show, and it's awesome. I love TV Obscura, and I have an absolute blast doing this with my 2 best pals. Too bad you guys are only a few hundred miles away, not too far. One day we'll be there to see you. Zach's doing the math in his head. He's like, that's not right, but okay.
I'm listening to your Portland rain. I'm listening to your Oregon rain coming down right now.
Yeah, it is raining. It's the rainy season up here. But thank you all so much for loving and supporting the show. We love you all. And as always,
catch you on the obscure side, because knowing is half the battle. Lucky me.
Yo, Joe!
Be sure to subscribe to Podcasting After Dark and give us a 5-star rating on iTunes. Support Podcasting After Dark on Patreon. Follow us on Instagram and Facebook at Podcasting After Dark. And visit us next time for another installment of Podcasting After Dark with Corey Stevenson and Zach Schaefer.